Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyau Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantif Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we begin today on verse number 19. Ihaivatayirchitas sargo yesham samye sthitam manaha nirdosham hi samam brahma tasmat brahmani te sthitaha. Even here is the relative existence conquered by them whose mind rests in equality. For Brahman is even and faultless, therefore are they established in Brahman. The earlier verse 18, which we studied last time, showed how the wise being sees everyone with an equal eye. As an example were given a Brahmana endowed with learning and humility, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and an outcast. So an enlightened being makes no distinction between people because the divine is equally present in and through everything. And since the enlightened being has become one with the divine makes no distinction. God has no favorites. So an enlightened being also sees everyone with an equal eye. Now that raises an interesting dilemma in some ways. We can see that even in our day-to-day world, while we are all able to appreciate the value and recognize the truth of equality, we still know as we go out into the street, all are not equal. And the same society and culture which emphasizes equality also finds a place for inequality in some ways. To give a very simple example is if you go to any public event and if the president of the country is also present at that event, well, really, a president of the country is as much a citizen of the country as you and I are. And yet, it's not exactly the same kind of welcome, arrangement, and treatment given to all. That doesn't mean everyone is intrinsically unequal. So we recognize equality, and we also recognize that for some good reason, some distinctions have to be made in day-to-day life. Same is true even in some ritualistic situations. That is why this commentary on the earlier verse actually quotes from one of the Dharma Sutras, which deal with some of the ritualistic portions, in which says that if you look at the commentary on page 171, if you read in the translation, it's called a Gautama Dharma Sutras. By worshipping equals and unequals with difference and equality respectively. So it's unwise. So everyone must be given their just dues. So if you don't follow it, then you're breaking a rule. So now it just seems like the enlightened beings are not recognizing the inequality that we all accept in daily life. So, as you can see, you understand that we are all equal, at the same time we are not equal. But for an enlightened being, there is no inequality at all. So, and why does that happen? And that's what is described in the verse that we just read. Even here is the relative existence conquered by them whose mind rests in equality, for Brahman is equal, etc. In other words, an enlightened being goes beyond all rules. So the rules that are made in that scriptural quote given from Dharma Sutras is really meant for novices, for those who are on the way. But one who has reached the goal, one goes beyond all rules. We see that happening in the life of Ramakrishna also. So when we do ritualistic worship, so there are certain procedures to be followed. There is a certain way it ought to be done. Now, sure, when we worship God out of love, God is not sitting to say, oh, you didn't follow this rule properly, so I'm not going to give you. That never happens. The rules that are there for any practice are for the discipline of the practitioner. So even in worship, there are certain rules of how a worship has to be done. The ritualistic worship, the puja that we do at the center, there are certain rules. And if we follow those rules correctly, then we are instilling that discipline within us. Once that discipline enters within us, that discipline itself helps us not only purify ourselves, but to go beyond the rules. So it's through rules that we go beyond rules. And once you go beyond rules, then even if you're not consciously breaking rules in order to break rules, but you are not bound by rules anymore. And we see that in Sri Ramakrishna's case. He was a pujari also. He was doing puja in the temple, and he was very meticulous in the way he did worship. But a stage was reached in his life when his heart and mind was so filled with the presence of the divine that rules no more remained in his form of worship. Not because he was being a kind of what would you say? Just revolting, yeah. Just wanting to break rules. That was not his idea, but the rules slipped away, and that's why then you see that when he's doing worship, a cat enters the place, and instead of feeding the offering meant for the deity, he's able to see the divine present in the cat, and he feeds the cat. Now that's a most big no-no. That's a completely, that's not the way you do worship. But in his case, that was not a defect, or that was not something wrong, because he had gone beyond that. And that's why he could see the same divine present not only in the deity on the altar, but in everything. He said once he went to do worship, he saw not only is the image of the Divine Mother filled with consciousness, but even the puja items, the whole place was just shimmering with consciousness. Now, when we reach that state, then the rules don't apply to us anymore. Some of you might remember a story of the Buddha I have mentioned on some earlier occasions. As we know, Buddha lived for a ripe old age. And even when he was very old, he meticulously followed all the rules. Getting up in the morning and whatever, there's a big list of rules in the Buddhist monastic canon. And he followed all of them. And so we read in his life that his chief disciple was named Ananda. So he goes to Buddha and says, he can see his frail body, he's old. He said, oh Lord, you don't have to follow these rules anymore. These rules are made for the disciplining of the novices. And they're not meant for you. And of course, Buddha knew, he himself had made the rules, so he knew what. So Buddha smiled and said, yes, my friend, you are right. These rules are meant for novices. And I did follow them very meticulously when I was a novice myself. But now, I don't follow those rules anymore. The rules follow me. So when we cultivate a certain discipline in life, in the beginning we have to do it with effort. When it becomes a part of our being, then we don't have so much to follow it. It follows us.
So that is why when Ramakrishna broke rules, it was not for the intention of breaking rules. It was just that he was no longer able to follow it. And what can you do? If you're seeing divine everywhere, then the rules meant for seeing divine in one specific place won't hold good anymore. So that is the idea here. So for an enlightened being, because divine is equally present everywhere, because the divine makes no distinction, an enlightened being who has become one with the divine will also make no distinction of any kind. Verse 20. All the subsequent verses that we are going to read in this chapter really shows the characteristic of a being who has gone beyond all these distinctions that we live with. A being who is truly established in Brahman. And the description given here is meant so that we can now with effort try to live like this. In other words, an enlightened being doesn't see distinction anywhere, but we do. Now, in order for me to become enlightened, I must make a conscious effort not to see distinctions anywhere. Now, we might say, well, of course, I have eyes. I'm going to see distinction everywhere. Sure, I'm going to see distinction. You're not going to mistake a chair for a wall. We should distinguish between what is edible, what is not edible. That's true. But not making distinction means that intrinsically, I see that there is a one same truth underneath all. In other words, the more I'm able to eliminate prejudices and biases from my heart, the freer I will be. What prevents us from truly being free, joyful beings is the innumerable prejudices and biases that we have. And getting rid of these distinctions really means eliminating prejudices and biases. We will still see the differences, but those differences will not bind us. That is the idea. Verse 20. Na prarhishyet priyam prapya no dvijet prapya cha priyam sthira buddhir asammudho brahmavid brahmani sthitaha. The knower of Brahman, who is established in Brahman, poised in mind and undeluded, is not elated on getting what is pleasant, nor feels worried on getting what is unpleasant. Again, this is an elaboration of being, cultivating that same-sightedness. A knower of Brahman is established in Brahman. What does it mean actually? It seems like synonymous. Knowing Brahman is different from knowing any object. Because when you know an object, for instance, I know that chair to be a chair. So I say, I know the chair. Now there, knowing a chair would mean, I know the chair, it's an object of my perception. But knowing God or knowing Brahman doesn't really mean God is an object of my perception or God is an object of my experience. Since God is all that exists, knowing God, and going to sound odd because I'm using the word God, knowing God really means being God. Knowing Brahman really means being Brahman. So here, that is why it is said, the knower of Brahman is established in Brahman. That means what would be, even if we try to understand intellectually, what would be the experience of an enlightened being? Oh, all this is Brahman. This is how we normally describe it. But what it means is not simply this, even this is a part of this. So only one being exists, and I am that. Even the idea of I won't exist there, because there will be nothing other than I. So it is just the experience of being, just being. Sometimes you might get a brief glimpse into it if you are lucky enough. And sometimes that happens, for instance, if you had a really good restful sleep, and no one has shaken you out of your sleep, you just wake up in a very natural way, in a gradual way, not jumping out of your bed or anything. Just then, those first maybe a second or two, you just are. That time you're not even thinking of me or this or that. You're not thinking of anything. You just exist. Now that is the state, that just being. Even the I is absent. Sometimes, occasionally you will see, when your mind is really settled down, even the thought, I am now peaceful, becomes like an intrusion. You just are. And sometimes the greatest works of creativity have occurred in that sense when that I is completely absent. When you don't even have the awareness, I am painting this, or I am writing this, or even that can happen even not just in art, but in the work that you do also. For instance, if you're a physician, if you're a surgeon, and even you are engaged in a complicated surgery, that time, when your whole being is engaged in that work, even that ego, I am now operating this person, even that will vanish, because even then that can become a distraction. So our best work is done when even the awareness that I am doing it is absent. And that's what happens in the person who is established in Brahman. Even the idea that I am Brahman, even that idea becomes an intrusion. So such a person in that state does not become elated when getting what is pleasant, or upset when not getting what is pleasant, which is our present state is, of course, when we get what we want, we are happy. When we don't get what we want, we are unhappy. Now, an enlightened being is so filled with joy that all these petty getting of this or not getting of that is totally irrelevant. It's almost like the ocean. You go to the ocean and you say, oh, today for a few days it has not rained. So the ocean doesn't cry saying, oh, I'm deprived of water. Or not does it rain too much, you suddenly find the ocean level has increased. The ocean level may increase because of the tides. But if you just see the water content, that doesn't depend on a few days of rainfall or snowfall, because the ocean is so vast, it's infinite. Similarly, an enlightened being is so filled with the sense of completeness that nothing can make an enlightened being feel incomplete. So that is the idea. In other words, so what is the message for us? A message for us is not that if you get something which you like, you should not be happy. That's not the idea. But both, can I keep both my joy and sorrow under check? Because if I cannot control my happiness, I will not be able to control my pain. Let me be so filled with joy that all other kinds of joy or all other kinds of pain will appear completely immaterial, inconsequential. That's the idea. You see, that's the joy of when the work that you do with single-minded attention, the work itself can bring such joy. The doing of work, that striving for excellence, or doing work as in a spirit of karma yoga itself can bring so much joy that later on, whether people come and appreciate your work or they don't appreciate work, won't make any difference, because you're already filled with joy just doing that work well. But if I'm doing it for appreciation, then if my work is not appreciated, then I'm going to be unhappy. Or if somebody comes and appreciates it, then I'm like, finally I've got some recognition. But why? If the work itself can bring me so much joy, I will not depend on anything. Because you see, recognition, appreciation from the external world may come, may not come. You really don't have much control over it. And if you pin your own joy or sorrow and what may or may not come, you are at the mercy of the world. But doing work in the best possible way, that's under your control. And if you can get the greatest joy out of it, whether you get appreciation or not, whether you get what you want or not, becomes completely irrelevant. That's the ideal that the Gita puts before us. Verse 21. Bahyasparsheshvasaktatma vindatyatmani yat sukham sa brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnute. He whose mind is unattached to the external objects of the senses attains to the bliss that is in the self. He with his mind identified with Brahman through absorption in it enjoys undecaying bliss. Two key phrases here. The bliss that is in the self, Atma Sukham, the joy of the self itself, and undecaying bliss, Akshaya Sukham. To put it very briefly, where does joy exist? And we might be tempted to say, well, joy exists in the things that bring me joy. So, if ice cream makes me happy, there is joy in the ice cream because I eat that ice cream and then my mind is filled with joy. So, it's natural to think that the joy is in the ice cream because of this cause and effect relationship. The problem with this way of thinking, of course, is that some people hate ice cream. So if the joy were in the ice cream itself, then everyone should have enjoyed it. But not everyone does. So first of all, you can question whether the joy is in the ice cream itself. Secondly, there is also a limit to how much ice cream you can eat at one sitting. So if you keep on eating, after a while, it's not going to taste any longer. It's in fact, you're just going to push it away, even if somebody were to, you say, no, I can't take it anymore. So that is the second thing. A third thing is, of course, no matter how much you get joy through the ice cream, it is not undecaying. After a while, after a few minutes, it goes away. If you want more joy, you need to take more ice cream. And there is a limit to how much you can take also. And so we can seriously question whether joy exists in any of the objects or people or places outside of us. So where does that joy come from? If it is not in the ice cream, from where does it come? Now, the Vedantic psychology explains it this way. The source of all joy is really the self, the spirit within us. What prevents us from experiencing that joy of the spirit, the Atma Sukham, the bliss that is in the self that is mentioned in this verse, what prevents us from getting that bliss is that our mind is restless. The mind is filled with desires. It's like a water which is filled with ripples and waves. You won't be able to see the bottom of the lake clearly because it's so lashed into waves. So our mind similarly is a big mess somewhere. And so the joy which is there is not able to shine out. So let's say one thing that is agitating me right now is I really love ice cream and I want ice cream. So this ice cream desire is agitating my mind. And so then I go and get ice cream. So at least if that's the dominant desire in my heart right now and I'm eating ice cream, then that one desire is getting fulfilled. So my mind is at that moment, once I'm eating that ice cream, it's there on my tongue and it's kind of melting and I'm getting all the delicious taste out of it. So my mind relatively becomes calm because that desire is fulfilled. Now that moment of calmness, when you're just swallowing it and just feeling it going down and just enjoying it, the mind is that relative calmness of the mind, the joy of the self shines forth. So we are actually making wrong connections here. The joy that we experience is a joy that comes from a mind that has momentarily become calm and the fulfillment of the desire, but I am kind of projecting that joy on the ice cream. And then later on again, I said, oh, I need one more. So then my mind has become disturbed again. Then I take one more piece of ice cream, and then I feel happy again. So it's a wrong connection. Sometimes the example given is that of a camel eating from a thorny bush, it's in the desert, and all these. Occasionally you come across some thorny bushes, and that's what the camel eats. Now, while the camel is eating, because of the thorns, its mouth and the lips are kind of pricked by the thorns, and the blood starts coming. And then the camel is munching on the leaves, and it's getting mixed up with the blood of this thing. When the camel thinks, finally I'm able to extract some juice out of it, and is enjoying it. He says, how delicious these leaves are. They're very juicy. But really, that juice is nothing but its own blood. But it's not aware of it. It's making wrong connections. Its own blood, which is bringing that sense of the thing being juicy, is thinking it's getting it, extracting it out of the leaves that it eats. That's more or less how things are. All the joy that we experience in life is a joy that is coming from our own self. But we make this wrong connection like that camel. We think the joy comes from objects, people, places, things. And that is why we are not able to experience that bliss of the self, because we are making wrong connection. Now, if we make the right connection, then we will know that the joy comes from the self. Now, the interesting thing is this. The ice cream may not always be there. The things that seem to make us happy may not always be around. But if the joy comes from the self is always me. Well, self is not just always with me. I am the self. So nobody can take the self away from me, because nobody can take me out of me. And the joy is in the self. In other words, all the joy that we seek in life, all the fulfillment that we seek in life is already within us. If I can tap into that joy, I won't need anything outside of me. And we already know now, if this way of understanding how that joy comes makes sense, that the more I'm able to minimize the fluctuations in my mind, the waverings in my mind, the more I'm able to make my mind calm, the more joy I will experience. And it's not rocket science. We know it from our own experience also. There are times when we really feel calm and peaceful. That's the time mind is not agitated with future worries or past memories, with future projects or desires. The mind is, even in that state of relative calmness, you already experience some kind of an inner contentment. Now that inner contentment can be made permanent if I make a conscious effort to try to keep my mind calm. And the mind can remain calm if I can eliminate my strong likes and strong dislikes. The more I remain even-minded, the happier and contented I will be. And then that is when I'll get this undecaying bliss. All other bliss will decay, because everything in life is transitory. Nothing remains permanent. If beautiful roses bring you joy, those rose petals are going to wither away after a day. You have to go and get some new roses. But the joy that comes from the self will never wither away. That's the idea. Verse 22. Ye hi samsparshajai bhoga dukkha yonaya evate
Adyantavantah kaunteya Nate shuramate buddha. Enjoyments born of sense objects are indeed the sources of misery. They have, O son of Kunti, a beginning and an end. The wise man does not rejoice in them. So this is the continuation of what we saw. That sure, things in this world seem to make us happy, there is no doubt about it. But they all have a beginning and an end. If we want a joy that is without beginning, without end, then we have to turn inward. That is the message that comes to us from them. And the more I get entangled in the seeming joy that comes from outside, the more deprived I become from the joy that is already present in my heart. Verse 23. So how do I go about trying to acquire this inner joy that is described in verse 23? Shaknoti ihaiva yasodhum praksharira vimokshanat kama krodhodbhavam vegam sayuktasya sukhi naraha. He who is able to withstand the urge arising from passion and anger in this very life, before the fall of the body, is poised and a happy man. So there are two things which take away our poise and our joy. And it is this arising from kama and krodha, desire and anger. We see that when the mind is relatively free from any immediate desires or any cause of anger, we are calm. So the two major obstacles in experiencing that inner contentment and joy is always this fluctuating mind due to desire, and when the desire meets with an obstruction, then there is anger. So both are connected. In an earlier portion that we have studied, Krishna says these are the two great enemies, kama and krodha, desire and anger. The more we try to minimize them, the happier we get. And as I've advised you some time back, it's sometimes helpful to just make a list of what are the desires I have in life, and then go over each item in that list, and then ask yourself, do I really need it? Will life be impossible without it? Or what? And then you can prioritize them. And if it's possible to eliminate as many of them as possible, just imagine and say, well, this is something I desire. What if I never get it? What is going to happen? You can question yourself in whichever way you want, but the goal of this exercise is this: the shorter your list is, the happier you're going to be. And so, and then don't show your list to anyone, just keep it to yourself. Look at it maybe once a week or once a month and see if it can be made smaller, or in fact if it is becoming bigger. And so that can be an index of one's own contentment index, if you like. And so what this verse points out is that if I'm able to keep that force that overcomes me because of desire and anger under check until I die, then such a person attains that poise and becomes truly happy. Verse 24. Yontas sukhontara ramaha tathantar jyotireva yaha sayogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhutodhigacchati.
he whose happiness is within, whose rejoicing is within, and whose light is within, that yogi, established in Brahman, attains emergence in Brahman. Again, if that yogi attains emergence in Brahman, means that is what this should be our effort, to try to find happiness within us, to try to find all the cause for rejoicing within us, to find the light within us. And the reason why we should do it, because only within us we have complete freedom. We speak so much about being in a free society, but we know, yes, we are in a free society, but the society also puts a lot of limitation. There are a lot of rules. There are a lot of things we are not happy about, and so on. So, but we can say we are at the social level, at the political level, economic level, and so on, we do enjoy perhaps more freedom than some other societies in other parts of the world. It's only a difference in degree. But if we are looking for complete freedom, then that complete freedom can come only within us. And the reason it can come within us, because within us, we are the masters. We don't depend on anything outside. But anything outside of us, our freedom gets limited, because we have limited control over anything outside of us. We can control them up to a point. I mean, it's like this: when you go to your workplace, your boss may have some control over you, but your boss cannot control your entire life. So even the boss's control over you is limited. The most, if you get just disgusted, just say, I resign and go. So the control of anything outside of you is limited. But you have complete control over your inner life. And that's the freedom we must explore. The more we are engaged with what's outside, the more we are taken away from what's inside, the more freedom we seem to lose. And that is why those who are able to go within, Sri Ramakrishna used to sing that song very often, dive deep, O mind. The more we are able to dive within and experience that inner freedom, with the clarity of vision that inner freedom gives us, then we look out, then we are able to deal with the challenges of the external world in a much better way, in a much mature way, in a wiser way, when we are dipped into that source of all freedom within our heart. And that is why it's very beautiful, this verse. Anta sukhaha, happiness is within. Antar aramaha, the rejoicing is within. Antar jyotihi, the light is within. The light within is the light of consciousness. So when a yogi is established in Brahman, such a yogi will become one with Brahman. And that is the goal before us. So here Krishna is not describing some mythical yogi. What Krishna is saying is every one of us has this potential to be a yogi. This is what we all can become if we put our mind to it. Verse 25. Labhante brahma nirvanam rishaya kshina kalmashaha Chinnadvaidha yatatmanaha sarvabhutahite rataha. Sages whose sins have waned away, whose doubts have been dispelled, who have controlled their mind, and who are devoted to the welfare of all beings, attain absorption in Brahman. Again, what it means is that we must try to dispel our doubts, do it by questioning, do it by study, do it by reflection. We must try to control our mind, and we must be devoted to the welfare of all beings. For a sage who is already enlightened, this will happen effortlessly. We have to make an effort to try to help all those around you as much as it lies in your power. Surely, our capacity to help is limited, no doubt. We cannot help and take away the miseries of the whole world. That's true. but in whatever little way it is possible to help anyone. And that anyone doesn't have to be always a stranger. That anyone could be a part of your family, could be a friend, could be a colleague. So sometimes people feel, only if I go to some distant place and help people when there is earthquake, then that is service. And that is service, that's true. But sometimes we may ignore the people around us, the people we live with, in order to go and do service to some total strangers. So service or helping people includes everyone. Those around us, those whom we meet on a daily basis, or those whom we may meet occasionally. It could mean people who are known to us, it could include people who are unknown to us. But wherever we see any need for help, and if it is possible for me to help, I must try to help them in a spirit of yoga. And if I do it, then I will be absorbed in Brahman. I will be one with that infinite reality. Verse 26. Kama krodha viyuktanam yatinam yatachetasam abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam. Sages who are free from passion and anger. Look at it, again he is bringing that kama krodha that I mentioned to you. Again and again Krishna will emphasize these two. Sages who are free from passion and anger, who have controlled their mind and who have realized the self, attain absorption in Brahman here and hereafter. In other words, that enlightenment is not a post-mortem experience. In order for us to, if you want to go to heaven, you have to die for it. But if you want to attain enlightenment, you can get enlightenment right now. That is the meaning of here and hereafter. So, this seems a much better deal. If we can become free right now, why wait? And so that is what the Gita teaches us. Verse 27, 28. I'm just going through these verses because the ideas are not new, that it's emphasizing what we really need to remember. Verse 27, 28. Sparshan kritva bahirbahyan chakshushchaivantare bhruvoho pranapanau samau kritva nasabhyantarcharinau yatendriyamano buddhihi munirmokshaparayanah vigatecha bhayakrodho yassada mukta eva saha. Shutting out external sense objects, fixing the gaze between the eyebrows, controlling the outgoing and incoming breaths that move through the nostrils, with the senses, mind, and intellect restrained, and free from desire, fear, and anger, the sage who has liberation as his highest goal is indeed ever free. So here you can see, a very brief, concise way, the practice of meditation, or the preparation and the practice are given in a very, very concise manner. The next chapter that we will study, we'll discuss, that will be actually the yoga of meditation. So we will go through this in a little bit more detail then. But as you can see, here it's pretty self-explanatory. There isn't much philosophy here. But what the idea is that the more I'm able to use the practice of meditation to shut out the world outside and discover the truth within my heart, then in the beginning, meditation may remain one isolated practice in the course of a 24-hour cycle that we all pass through. But it's not just the few minutes of meditation that you do in the morning or evening. That is the limit of spiritual practice. So meditation one kind of meditation will end. For instance, if you meditate say, every day, half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening, clearly you have, according to the way your teacher has taught you, so you will, whichever way, whatever method you have, you'll have your meditation seat, you sit, you go through the preliminaries, you repeat God's name, you meditate, and then in the end you conclude, and then you say, now it's time for me to do something else. The goal of meditation is that even when I leave the meditation seat, I'm still continuing with that meditation, but in a different way. You can't be sitting all the time, but sitting meditation is only one form of meditation. That's a kind of a meditation which is very intense in some way, because you're not supposed to be doing anything else then. But after that, when I get up, when I go about my day's activities, a part of me should continue that meditative awareness. Now that's the goal. In the beginning, it won't happen. In the beginning, my meditation would still be 2 points of reference in the morning and evening. But gradually, with the quality of my meditation improving, something of that meditation must stick with me even after I get up from my meditation seat, even when I go about carrying out my other duties and responsibilities. Gradually, when that happens, then you will see the whole life, whole day can be one continuous meditation. You will still have these 2 main points of meditation, but the rest of the time you won't be completely cut off from that awareness. In fact, once you are able to maintain that awareness in however faint a manner throughout the day, you will be able to, you will surprise yourself. You will find a little bit of it will remain even when you are asleep. Once the repeating of your mantra kind of enters, it's like it just becomes one with you, then when you wake up in the morning, now it's a good practice that when you wake up in the morning, the first thing is, even when you're still lying in bed, consciously try to remember your mantra, repeat the mantra. It's a very good practice. But once this awareness kind of sticks with you throughout the day, and once you make it a habit that even before going to sleep, you just kind of glide into sleep repeating your mantra. The day will come, you'll find when you wake up, without making conscious effort, you'll find that mantra bubbling from within you. So that's the goal, that awareness must remain with us throughout the day, throughout the night. And in order for that to happen, I must try to improve the quality of my morning and evening meditations. It's not the length of time that's important. It's not how many hours you sit, but whatever time you sit, how much are you able to bring your whole being to remain fixed into that practice? So that will be the main focus of the chapter that we'll do next. So these 2 verses are kind of a preview of what is going to come. Verse 29. Bhoktaram yajna tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Surudam Sarvabhutanam Jnatva Mam Shanti Mricchati. Knowing me, the enjoyer of all sacrifices and asceticism, the great Lord of all the worlds, and the well-wisher of all beings, one attains peace. So knowing the divine as the one who all our prayers, all our worship, all our offerings ultimately go to that one reality, recognizing the truth of that one being, seeing in a personal way that one divine being is the one who maintains, protects, and guides us all. Seeing in an impersonal way that being, the truth, the being is the truth behind the whole universe. The spirit is the truth behind me. So that truth and this truth are one and the same. And that is the idea, and that is what is the goal that the Gita puts before us. So with this we come to the end of this chapter 5. Before we conclude, if you have any comments, questions, thoughts, especially about the portion that we have studied today. Yeah.
So, Swamiji, we earlier learned in earlier chapters and verses is that we are not the mind and the body either. But now today we're learning about everything is about mind. Is basically about training your mind.
Yeah.
And to me it sounds like enlightenment is nothing but training your mind. So
Yes.
how? So
you're-
isn't that the mind is the
We
most
are-
important
Right.
here?
We are not the mind, but in order for us to know and realize that we are not the mind, we must train the mind.
Yeah.
So it's like this. Now, intellectually we can understand, oh, I'm the Atman, I'm not the mind. But even that understanding is through the mind. So that is really we only have two instruments right now, the body and the mind. The body, of course, is perishable, but we need body in a relatively good condition in order for us to even think and understand all this. But we need the mind as well, because it is through the mind and the intellect we are studying this, trying to understand. Now, the more we are able to train the mind, the more we are able to refine the mind, the more we are able to discipline the mind gets purified. And it is the purified mind that can transcend itself. And that is why Sri Ramakrishna says, pure mind, pure intellect, and pure Atman are one and the same. So once the mind attains to 100% purity, you can't distinguish it from the spirit. So all the dross, all the impurities have gone. What remains is the spirit. So it's a continuous, we can have a purification plant within, keep on purifying until all the impurities goes away, and all that will remain is just the spirit. So yes, you are right. That's how it is. Yeah.
Swamiji, you talked about looking at everyone without distinction. And later on in the chapter, we also talked about not being influenced by passion or with anger. Mm-hmm. So how does one go through life interacting with people who are causing you grief? Intentionally, let's just take the instance of intentionally causing you grief and directed towards you. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with these people and situations?
Yeah, good question. When someone is causing me grief, we have to also understand that I'm not just a non-participating agent in that process. I'm allowing the grief to be caused. So I am participating in it. So first of all, what we can do is, why allow anybody's anger or hatred or whatever in me? So it's like this. For instance, in your computer, we can say, what am I going to do with all these viruses and bugs going in? Well, you can have a firewall. So there is no way you're going to stop the production of viruses in the world. But what you can do is you can create a firewall and not allow the stuff to come and infect your computer. Now, all the hatred and anger that seems to come from outside are really the viruses. And this is the body is a kind of a computer. And so if I can make my firewall so strong that no matter how much anybody may try to throw hatred, anger, jealousy at me, but I can become impervious to it. And so if I'm not able to do it, I can go on protesting, but that's really not going to solve, because you're never going to be able to eliminate all the causes of grief from the universe. And as I said, your full freedom lies only here, not so much outside. So from a practical standpoint, it makes sense to first of all make ourselves strong enough not to become so easily victimized by what is happening outside. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything outside. Of course, as much as it lies in your power, if you can try to eliminate injustice or evil in whichever form outside, go ahead and do it. But recognize that all sadness or grief that we experience, we are also participating in it in some way by opening our doors and allowing it to enter within us. Yeah. Yeah.
Swamiji, you said that enlightenment is possible here and now. Do you think that's possible for 100% of the world's people here and now?
Yes, not at the same time. Yeah, of course. And it's not me. It's what Vedanta says. It's what Krishna says. If it's possible for one person, it's possible for anybody. And if anyone says only a few chosen people will be enlightened, then just throw away that. At least I wouldn't have any respect for that way of thinking, which says only a few people can get it and others don't. So Vedanta says every one of us has the potential to realize the infinite. Now, whether we succeed in doing it today or tomorrow depends on how intensely we want it and how much effort we put into it. But yes, it is possible.
Swamiji, so if everything is part of one divine, why would there be even the need to create a world with disparities and differences in, let's say, the threshold of happiness? Is that just, is it just an illusion, or is that, an intentional creation to help one evolve into something that's higher than what one is?
You tell me. Well, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I am also in the world just like you are. I don't know why this world is created. I mean, so much, it would have been so much better if nothing had been there, isn't it? Yeah. But I think, but this is still an academic question because the deed is done. Whether, why it created, I can tell you there are any bunch of stories about why it was created. But it really, I think everyone can find out for themselves. My problem is, it's here right now. And if it is not creating any difficulty for you, enjoy it. If you're not happy with it, try to find some way out of it. And that's the thing. And that's what the Buddha's approach was. It's like what you do. If you have a 911 and if a person is suffering, you don't that is not the time to discuss, so like, give me your family history or anything like that. That's the first thing, is if a person is now bleeding, stop the bleeding, make the person, and then later on you can investigate into the deeper questions. So right now, why did this world come about is not as urgent a question as, we are suffering, how can I end this suffering? And the beauty is, once I am able to end the suffering, the question won't remain. That's the thing. Yeah. Yeah, Shrikant.
In most of these verses, I think they mention about passion and anger. But passion is always looked as a positive thing in the world, that we need to have passion to achieve something or work hard or whatever.
I think you're looking more at the translation. Then the Sanskrit term is kama. Kama means a desire, anything that agitates the mind. So that word passion is used in that sense.
Okay.
Desire, yeah.
Then passion is good?
Well, it's, of course, good or bad is so relative. The thing is this, passion for what? See, for instance now, I can use the word passion and say, I passionately want to realize God. My one desire is to realize God. Well, that's a desire, that's a passion because I'm using the word passion. But if it is connected with enlightenment, well, I'll say it's good. But if my passion is regarding anything else other than that, it's good and bad will depend on what your needs are. Because my passion for anything other than that is first of all going to be not undecaying. It's going to end. It's going to leave me unfulfilled at some point. So no other passion can bring me complete fulfillment of it. So if I am happy with getting bits and pieces of joy interspersed with bits and pieces of pain, then we don't even need to do any of this. But if we are not happy with the way things are now, then we have to look deeply into what this role of anger, desire are in my life. That's the idea. Yeah. So we begin not by eliminating passion, but investigating into the passion and see where is my passion directed toward and what is it doing. If it is bringing you fulfillment in life, no need to get rid of life. No need to get rid of it. If you find that it is in fact disturbing you, in fact it is bringing you pain as well, then try to see how that pain can be removed. That's the idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Irina, you wanted to ask something?
It's more or less. Swami,
Hold it closer.
Thank you. So I try to understand this contentment of mind, and to be discontented with my spiritual development now. So to be contented, as I understand, it's to have mind balanced without desire and anger. So it's condition for my striving to high spiritual development, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So one helpful thing in this is, if one can accept this premise, it becomes helpful to remain contented. And the premise is this: to recognize that nothing in this world can keep me away from what I truly deserve. No obstacle, no person, no power can stop me from getting what I deserve. And if I don't deserve something, even if I move heaven and earth, I'm not going to get it. If this premise makes sense to you, it will become much more easier to remain contented. And also the other words that I once often mentioned, we studied in the Panchadashi. What is going to happen is going to happen. What will not happen will not happen. Knowing this, wise ones become free from delusion and the poison of anxiety. So think about these two observations. And if they make sense to you, then life becomes a little bit, it's never going to be completely a smooth ride, but a little bit easier than that. You know?
Swamiji, when you say that what's going to happen is going to happen, it's not going to change it, it doesn't mean that we will be lazy. We have to do.
Of course, yeah.
Because one can say, okay.
Yeah, we have to carry out our duties as best we can. We must work hard, but having done the best we can in any situation, then we step back and then see what will happen. Because a lot of time, our worries and anxieties is what rob us of that contentment and joy. And all that we need to do is to do the right thing, do what is good, follow the right path, and then let things take their own course. Recognizing that whatever I truly deserve, nobody can take it away from me. And if there is something I don't deserve, I'm never going to get it. That works for me at least. So it's brought me contentment. So here is one secret tip. Okay, so we'll stop here. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. So this Sunday, we will have the Krishna festival on 17th. It will be at 11 o'clock as usual, prayer, meditation, music. We'll have a small worship, and then we'll have potluck lunch. So once again, an opportunity to taste the different favorite dishes of all our friends and members. So all of you are welcome on Sunday at 11 for the Krishna festival. So next 2 Wednesdays, we won't have the study group meeting. And so we will meet now on, I think it's 4th of September. I think it is the 4th. So after Labor Day, the third. So we'll meet on the Wednesday after Labor Day. So 2 weeks you have time to reflect. And when we come on the 3rd, we will start on chapter 6 of the Gita. We'll conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being become manifest unto us. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May the Divine bless us all and fill our hearts with infinite grace and love. Peace, peace, peace be unto us.